Here's something most Canadians don't realize. Ontario isn't one place. It's two completely different worlds pretending to be the same province. There's Southern Ontario, Toronto, Ottawa, the Golden Horseshoe, home to 12 million people, dense cities, highways everywhere, the economic engine of Canada. And then there's Northern Ontario, a region larger than France, over 800,000 square kilometers, with only about 780,000 people. That's fewer people than Mississauga. Drive north from Toronto for 4 hours and you'll cross an invisible line. The landscape changes, the cities disappear, the highways thin out, and you enter a world that feels nothing like the Ontario you know. Northern Ontario has more in common with the Yukon than it does with Toronto. Different economy, different culture, different challenges, and yet it's governed by the same provincial government in Toronto. A government many Northerners feel doesn't understand them, doesn't represent them, and doesn't care about them. This isn't just about geography, it's about identity, economics, and a divide so deep that some Northerners have seriously talked about forming their own province. This is why Northern Ontario feels like a different country. Let's start with where Northern Ontario actually begins. There's no official border, no sign that says, "Welcome to Northern Ontario," but ask people who live there and many will point you to the same place, the French River. About 300 kilometers north of Toronto, Highway 69 crosses it. For generations, it's been the mental dividing line between down south and up north. South of the French River is what most Canadians picture when they hear Ontario. North of it is something else entirely, and you feel the change almost right away. First, the people disappear. Southern Ontario squeezes over 12 million people into roughly 150,000 square kilometers, around 80 people per square kilometer. Northern Ontario spreads about 780,000 people across more than 800,000 square kilometers, roughly one person per square kilometer. You go from one of the most densely populated regions in Canada to one of the emptiest in a single drive. Then the cities drop away. In the south, urban areas bleed into each other. From the highway, it feels like one long, continuous city. Head north, and that pattern breaks. Up here, the cities are like islands in a sea of forest and rock. Sudbury is the biggest. Then there's Thunder Bay, Sault Ste. Marie, Timmins, North Bay, all separated by long stretches of road where it's just you, the trees, and the next gas station far ahead. Drive from Sudbury to Thunder Bay and you're on the road for about 1,000 kilometers. Much of it, especially along Lake Superior, just 2 lanes of asphalt and wilderness. As the towns thin out, the land itself changes under your wheels. Southern Ontario is relatively gentle. Rolling farmland, richer soils, milder climate. Northern Ontario is the Canadian Shield. Ancient granite bedrock, boreal forest, thousands of lakes, and winters that are longer and sharper. And beneath that landscape, life runs on a different track. In Southern Ontario, the big engines are finance, tech, manufacturing, services, and government. In the north, jobs come from what's in the ground, the forest, and the water, mining, forestry, hydroelectric power, and tourism. Even the daily rhythm is different. Southern Ontario is urban, multicultural, fast-paced. The north is more rural, more working class, built on a frontier toughness. Fix it yourself, help your neighbor, don't expect Queen's Park to show up quickly. Hunting, fishing, snowmobiling, and weekends at camp aren't just hobbies, they're normal life. And underneath it all, there's a quiet frustration, the sense that this vast region is being governed by people hundreds of kilometers away who don't live the same reality. That invisible border at the French River isn't just geography. It marks a divide in how people live, work, and imagine their future. And many in the north feel it's only getting deeper. Here's what most people don't understand about Northern Ontario. It's not economically irrelevant. It's not a burden on the province. Northern Ontario is an economic powerhouse. It just doesn't look like one because the wealth flows south. Start with mining. When you drive into Sudbury, you're entering one of the world's great mining districts. The city sits on the Sudbury Basin, a massive crater formed about 1.8 billion years ago when a meteorite slammed into the earth. That impact left an incredible concentration of metals: nickel, copper, platinum, palladium, gold. People have been pulling those out of the ground for more than a century. Today, giants like Vale and Glencore run huge mines and smelters in and around Sudbury. Across Ontario, mining contributes billions of dollars to GDP every year, and a big share happens in the north. Timmins is another piece of that story, one of Canada's great gold camps. The Porcupine mines have produced tens of millions of ounces since 1909, often quoted at over 70 million. Kirkland Lake is a similar name in mining history, with gold mines operating in one form or another for more than 100 years. And then there's the Ring of Fire, way up in the James Bay lowlands. On the map, it looks like nowhere. Muskeg, rivers, no roads. But underground, it holds significant deposits of chromite, nickel, copper, and other critical minerals. The value of known ore bodies is often put in the tens of billions, with bigger numbers thrown around politically. Added up, and mining alone contributes on the order of $8 to $10 billion a year to Ontario's economy, heavily concentrated in Northern Ontario. And mining is just one pillar. Look up from the rock and you hit the forest. Northern Ontario's boreal forest covers millions of hectares. Logging, sawmills, and pulp and paper plants in places like Thunder Bay, Sault Ste. Marie, and Kapuskasing turn that timber into lumber, pulp, and paper. Ontario's forest sector brings in over $20 billion in revenue and contributes around $5 billion to provincial GDP, with many jobs and mills in the north. But the scars are obvious. Mills have closed, shifts cut, and some towns have lost their main employer. Then there's the power running through almost every outlet in the province. Northern rivers have been dammed and harnessed for hydroelectricity for over a century. Ontario Power Generation's hydro fleet has roughly 7,500 to 8,000 megawatts of capacity, much of it in northern watersheds. Flip a light switch in Toronto, Ottawa, or the Golden Horseshoe, and there's a good chance some of that electricity started in a river hundreds of kilometers to the north. So if you add it all up, mining, billions of dollars a year in GDP and production. Forestry, tens of billions in revenue and billions in GDP. Hydroelectric power, thousands of megawatts feeding the provincial grid. Plus tourism layered on top. For a region many people barely think about, Northern Ontario helps generate tens of billions of dollars in economic value every year. But here's the catch. A lot of that wealth doesn't stay where it's created. Most major mining firms are headquartered in Toronto or overseas, so profits flow far from the mine headframe. Many forestry companies are part of large national or multinational groups. Decisions and profits are shaped far from the mill towns. Electricity flows south to power homes and factories, yet northern households pay roughly the same regulated rates as people in the south. Taxes and royalties flow into provincial coffers in Toronto, where the money is pooled and spent where the people and votes are. The result is a paradox. Northern Ontario produces enormous wealth but sees only a fraction of it directly reinvested in its own roads, services, and communities. That's why so many people in the north talk about feeling like a resource colony, a place that sends out minerals, lumber, and electricity, while the big money and the big decisions live somewhere else. If Northern Ontario generates so much wealth, why does it feel so neglected? Because the infrastructure gap between north and south is staggering. Think about how you get around. Southern Ontario has a dense network of highways. The 400 series highways connect every major city. 4 lanes, well-maintained, constant upgrades. Northern Ontario runs on 2 main highways. Highway 11 runs from North Bay to Thunder Bay, about 1,000 kilometers. Much of it is 2 lanes. Highway 17 runs along the north shore of Lake Superior. 2 lanes, winding, dangerous in winter. Between these highways, mostly nothing. Small roads connecting isolated communities, and many First Nations communities have no road access at all. They rely on winter roads or fly-in access year-round. Now think about healthcare. In Southern Ontario, you're rarely far from a hospital. In Northern Ontario, you can be 200 to 300 kilometers from the nearest one. Emergency response times stretch by geography alone. Air ambulances are common because ground ambulances can't always get there fast enough. Specialist care often means travel. Cancer treatment, complex surgeries, long wait lists, frequently in the South. Then there's the digital side of life. Southern Ontario has high-speed internet and dense cellular coverage. Northern Ontario? Outside major towns, connectivity can be weak, inconsistent, or absent. That's not just inconvenient, it's an economic barrier for business, education, and healthcare. Public transit and intercity travel mirror the same story. Southern Ontario has geo-transit and major city systems. Northern Ontario has almost no public transit. If you don't have a car, you're stuck. Greyhound's cancellation left many communities with few options. Education pulls young people along the same path. Southern Ontario has dozens of universities and colleges. Northern Ontario has a handful, and many students who leave for programs and careers don't come back. Underneath all of this sits the investment gap. Big ticket spending concentrates in the South. Toronto Transit gets billions. Northern highways get slower upgrades. Northern hospitals fight shortages. Northern communities fight for scraps. And when Northerners complain, they're told the province can't afford it. But somehow, there's always money for another Southern expansion. This creates a vicious cycle. Poor infrastructure. Businesses don't invest, young people leave, population declines, political power declines, less investment. And the gap keeps widening. To really understand why the North feels so distant from the rest of Ontario, you have to look at political math. Ontario has 124 seats in its provincial legislature. Northern Ontario gets about 11. Less than 10% of the seats represent almost 90% of the land. Even if every Northern MPP voted together, they'd still be outnumbered 10-1. Elections are decided in and around Toronto, the Golden Horseshoe, and Ottawa. A party can win a comfortable majority while barely setting foot in the North. And the decisions are made in Toronto. That's where policy is built, budgets are shaped, and priorities are set. For people in Northern Ontario, it often feels like they're being governed by a city that doesn't live their reality. And that brings us to the next problem. Who's going to be living in the North in the future? Northern Ontario is aging faster than the rest of the province, and it's losing young people. People grow up, get educated, and often move south for jobs and opportunity. The ones who stay are, on average, older. Some communities already see shrinking school enrollment and growing demand for seniors' care. Meanwhile, Southern Ontario keeps growing, and that means the North's share of political power shrinks even more. Climate change adds another twist. Shorter winters affect winter access for remote communities. Hotter, drier summers stress forests and intensify fire seasons. And climate policies designed for cities hit differently in a region where people drive long distances and heat older homes through long winters. The one big future bet that keeps coming up is the Ring of Fire. On paper, it's a treasure chest of critical minerals. In practice, development has crawled for years. No permanent road, major environmental questions, and complicated negotiations with First Nations whose lands and rights are at the center of it all. So the North is caught in a paradox. It holds resources the world suddenly cares about: critical minerals, clean power, vast forests, but it doesn't control the capital, the rules, or the leverage to shape what happens next. That's why people in Northern Ontario talk not just about being far away, but about being left behind. Northern Ontario feels like a different country because, by almost every measure that shapes daily life, it's living a different version of Ontario. A region larger than many nations, spread across Canadian Shield Rock, boreal forest, and thousands of lakes, where distance isn't a detail, it's the defining feature. Its economy runs on resource extraction, mining, forestry, hydro, generating enormous value, while much of the wealth and decision-making power flows south. At the same time, the systems that define modern life look different there. Highways narrow to two-lane lifelines. Hospitals and specialists are often hours away, and connectivity and transit remain patchier than in the South. Politically, fewer than 1 in 10 seats represent this enormous region, so elections are won where the population is densest, while decisions shaping the North's future are largely made at Queen's Park by people who don't live the North's realities. And underneath all of that is the emotional part. A region that helps generate enormous value each year often feels like an afterthought when it comes to investment, planning, and long-term priority, especially as its population ages and its young people leave. So the question isn't whether Northern Ontario matters. It clearly does. The real question is whether Ontario will ever treat it like the core instead of the edge. If this changed how you see the Ontario map, leave a comment. And if you want more stories about how geography shapes politics and economies, consider subscribing for the next one.